Hi, everyone. We just started the webinar, so hopefully we will let a bunch of people in. We'll start right at the top of the hour because this is going to be recorded, so hopefully people can catch up on the intro slides later on. Welcome, everyone. We're just waiting one more minute until everybody has arrived, has filtered in. Thanks for your patience. All right, I think we should get started. So my name is Julianne Baruti. I am Verra's Senior Director of Forest Carbon Innovation, and I am pleased to share with you Verra's Forest Carbon Strategy. This is a strategy for 2024 through 2026, but it'll constantly be updated, and we'll try to be very communicative about that and transparent about it when it gets updated. This is just an introduction to something that we've been working on for quite some time, and hopefully you'll see that we've been making progress in some of these areas already. I'll have a lot of my team members on the call with me. They will be able to answer questions using the question and answer function. We won't be able to respond to questions if there's a chat function. So please use the question and answer function, and we really want to respond to questions that are related to the strategy. If you ask questions about specific methodologies, we will try to get to them, but we'll be prioritizing answers or answering questions related to this strategy. The webinar will be recorded and it will be available on the Verra website later today or tomorrow, and it will be sent out within 24 hours to everyone who registered for this webinar. And then if you have any follow-up questions, you can send them to forestcarbon@verra.org. Great, let's get started. So for the agenda, we are going to be presenting what we think of as a situational analysis, the context for this, our strategy, and then the strategy itself, our vision, goals, and strategies. So as you know, we are in a new era for Verra, and the forest carbon strategy is a part of our broader efforts to improve program excellence. Today, we're going to be focusing on forest carbon, but many of these operational improvements are also moving ahead. So we have an operational excellence goal, a program impact and scientific integrity goal, and an accountability goal. So all of these things you can find more about in our quarterly stakeholder update webinars, which you will be able to access if you're subscribed to the Verra newsletter. So you can sign up for that at Verra, verra.org. This is the team of colleagues who I am very proud to work with. So I'm going to start off by introducing the forest management staff, and then we have another part of the team that deals with RED, but we're totally integrated. So Spencer, would you please introduce yourself? Oh, you're muted. Still muted.
How about now?
Now you're good.
Okay. Hi, all. I'm Spencer Plum. I'm the Senior Manager for Forest Carbon Innovation, and I primarily work on our ARR, afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation methodologies, and our improved forest management methodologies. I contribute to forest management related updates to our VCS program as well. Part of my role is also to work with stakeholders to understand how to improve our methodologies and to continually working on improving both functionality and integrity of our methodologies. And I am based in Missoula, Montana, in the northwestern part of the US.
Thanks, Spencer. And as you can see, we are looking to build out our forest management team with a director and a program officer for afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation, and then a senior program officer for improved forest management. So that is a team that we are looking to really scale up, and you'll see some of the plans we have for that team later in the presentation. Naomi, I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Naomi Swickard, Senior Director for REDD+ Program Development and Innovation. So I'm overseeing the REDD side of the coin, and that involves the implementation of the new VM48 methodology, as well as all the other updates, improvements, and evolutions we are making to that program that we will go over today. We have in the team a number of members already, and also have a number of open positions. We've actually identified our candidates already for the Manager of Government and Technical Coordination Regional Leads, but we are still looking for those other open roles. So by all means, please share. A couple of those are not posted yet, but will be soon. But we look forward to bringing on more staff there. Tassila, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tassila Banda. I am the Director for REDD+ Program Development and Innovation. I work with Naomi and the rest of the team. I focus also on the new methodology, the new consolidated REDD+ methodology, especially the elements that involve the government engagement and other key stakeholder engagement, and working together with the team to make sure that we roll out this new methodology. I am living now in the US, in Pennsylvania, but I am originally from Zambia. Happy to be here and also to participate in the rolling out of the strategy at Verra.
Thanks, Tassila. And I forgot to mention I'm in Barcelona. Over to you, Salvador.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. I'm Salvador Sanchez Colon. I'm Mexican. I'm based in Mexico City. I'm the manager for REDD Technical Innovation. In this role, I support the continued evolution of our existing REDD methodologies, as well as the development of new ones as needed. And I'm also supporting Tassila's team in the engagement with governments in the Latin American and Caribbean region. Thank you.
And Andrew.
Hi there, I'm Andrew Copenhaver. I'm based in the DC region, just in Maryland. I am the manager of forest carbon data innovation under the REDD team. My primary tasks over the last several months have been putting together a lot of the implementation details for our new VM0048 module. But looking forward into the rest of 2024, I will be helping to support all of the other remote sensing and geospatial needs for the remainder of the team, and starting to do a bit of work with the Forest Carbon Working Group, which we still have an open call for participants in, and looking for DMRV solutions across our forest carbon needs in association with our technical solutions team. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Back to you, Julie.
Great. And just what Andrew mentioned now was the Forest Carbon Technical or Forest Carbon Technology Working Group. So we have two different working groups that are specific to forest carbon. One is the Forest Carbon Innovations Working Group, and then the other is this new Forest Carbon Technology Working Group. So maybe if one of my colleagues could just pop a link to the RFP for that into the, or maybe we could get a question asked about it. So then we could share a link to the RFP for it. That would be great. All right. So, and last but not least, I wanted to make sure Leela Rosen has a chance to introduce herself. She is a key member of the team as well.
Thanks, Julie, and I'd be happy to share the link for the working group in the chat in a moment. Thank you all for joining. My name is Leela Rosen, and I'm the Senior Program Officer with Forest Carbon Innovation Operations, based in Brooklyn, New York in the United States. And I support the whole team primarily through process and administrative management, as well as communications related pieces, helping ensure that everyone knows what we're doing, methodology development, and different stages of the process, and support with those rollouts. And yes, I'll share the working group information in the chat. If of interest, the deadline is end of day tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Julie.
Thanks, team. So moving on to the situational analysis. This is what we see as the issues, opportunities, achievements, and threats that we are facing, and what this strategy is intended to address. So hopefully we all know that forests are critical to addressing the climate crisis, and keeping forests standing through avoiding deforestation and forest degradation and improved forest management activities, and growing trees where they're ecologically appropriate through afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation are important activities. Generally, when these are talked about in the greenhouse gas emission reductions and removals context, and quantified in that context, they are categorized as RED, which is reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and forest management, which is conservation, sustainable management of forests, and the enhancement of forest carbon stocks in developing countries. That's a UN definition for RED plus, but we generally, those categories apply for the verified carbon standard as well. Verra and our partners use the carbon market to fund forest conservation and regeneration that would not be possible otherwise. So forest conservation and regeneration affects almost all of the sustainable development goals as well, and it benefits not only ecosystems, livelihoods, and empowering communities, but it also makes infrastructure more sustainable and more resilient to the impacts of a changing climate. So funding these activities for mitigating greenhouse gas emissions also has an important benefits as for the sustainable development goals as well. And the voluntary carbon market has the power to close that gap. So natural climate solutions can provide up to 30% of the necessary mitigation and removals that are needed to maintain our 2-degree ambition. As you see on this chart here, reforestation, avoided deforestation, and forest management accounts for the vast majority of mitigation potential from natural climate solutions. And just to have another angle on how this is contextualized, tropical deforestation, if it were a country, it would rank 3rd in greenhouse gas and carbon dioxide emissions. So it's 8% of global emissions. The voluntary carbon market as a source of finance for combating climate change has had steady growth to about 2012, and then it had a low in 2017 and a major increase in recent years. And a good amount of that value generated is from forestry and land use. And as you can see in this chart, it's more than double some of the other sources of the other volumes that are considered. Recently, credit buyers have been increasingly focused on key attributes associated with higher quality projects, including robust beyond carbon benefits, which we know that forest carbon projects have, and removals. So the ARR type projects, the afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation projects, and credits of more recent vintages. And we see that as demonstrated in the recent trends by sector, because issuances from RED have still maintained, despite the criticism that has been brought to this type of activity, they still maintain their strong presence in the market. To get more specific, we are seeing that RED issuance have gone down since 2023, but we're very hopeful that with our new RED methodology, we will open back up that stream of RED issuances. And then ARR in particular has increased since 2018. It's become a much bigger part of the space, and we are hopeful that with our new ARR methodology, that will also be much more of the capacity in the future. And then IFM we see is maintaining a presence as well. And I'll turn it over to Spencer Plum to talk about forest management challenges that we see in the strategy or in the coming years.
Thanks, Julie. So the first challenge that we see is just this idea that we need to continue to scale, and doing this while we are improving and updating our methodologies, and recognizing that we already have a portfolio of especially improved forest management methodologies. We need to make sure that we have coverage of different activity types in global geographies, but that we're also, when we are releasing methodologies, allowing those to be used and where it's most appropriate, and make sure we don't have overlap of methodologies. So ensuring integrity, but also giving people the tools to use the most recent methodologies and make sure that the credits that are being generated are the highest quality possible. We're also experiencing a lot of interest and seeing lots of new tools come out in the digital monitoring, reporting, and verification space, and use under dynamic baselines. And so a lot of this remote sensing and machine learning technology certainly can be leveraged, but it's up to us to figure out how do we create structures that enable the use of that technology, and don't favor different technologies because it's likely they will be obsolete by the time we're ready to roll them out. So we see this innovation curve as being really important, and just needing to tap into that with the architecture that allows us to use continually updating technologies. And then finally, recognizing this link between forest management and the wood products that are generated, and starting to develop the robust accounting tools necessary to consider or account for carbon storage in different types of wood products and wood uses after those products or after those trees are grown, figuring out what happens to them in the long run. So those are some of the big challenges that we're really excited to be tackling.
Thanks, Spencer. And now I'm going to turn it over to Naomi for the slide on RED issues and threats, keeping in mind that many of these same issues and threats are challenges for our improved forest management and afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation work as well.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. So we definitely some similar issues on the RED side in terms of rapid improvements in science and technology, which are part of the reason behind some of the issues that have cropped up over the last years around credibility and how do we take forest carbon accounting and RED accounting in particular into sort of the next version of markets, if we can call it that, incorporating a lot of those lessons learned and improvements in technology. We also see a real need to improve on the community engagement and safeguard side to ensure that Indigenous peoples and local communities are appropriately engaged with and treated within these projects. Other important stakeholders, of course, also include governments. And I think there is a real opportunity to bring together what national governments are doing in terms of their NDCs and national strategies on REDD with the project level. There's also complexities there that need to be worked out. And at the other end of the use of these units, we also see challenges and debates in the market around clarity on how corporates should use those units and also how they should think about credits from projects and those within their own supply chains. So we're looking at many of these issues as we move forward with our strategy.
And now, Naomi, I think you should continue and dive into the strategy.
Thank you. So we'll dive in here looking at, what does this mean? Given the growth in the market, the challenges that we're facing, and the need to really scale this sector to ensure that we're actually able to make the reductions and removals that are really necessary to solving the climate crisis. How can we at Verra support those efforts? So if you can move forward, Julie. We have essentially 4 major prongs to this strategy over the next couple of years. Overall, our goal and our vision is to unlock institutional scale investment and uptake into avoided deforestation, degradation, and other forest carbon activities by increasing the integrity and usability of our methodologies while making sure that we are respecting and benefiting Indigenous peoples and local communities. So we're going to do that through 4 major prongs. I'll go into each of these in just a moment. Number 1, we want to ensure that these activities are a large-scale driver of emission reductions and removals. We want to ensure that they help advance governmental forest carbon programs. We want to ensure that they are optimized to leverage the latest science and technology, and that at the end of the day, they are used with integrity. So let's dive into each of those. The first goal, number 1, again, forest carbon activities are a large-scale driver of emission reductions and removals, and that is in both the voluntary carbon markets as well as potentially leveraged within Article 6.2. In terms of the objectives and the way that we think that this can be accomplished is really about ensuring that these units are high integrity, that they meet the needs of the market and they meet the needs of the definitions of that integrity that are emerging both today in the ICVCM, but also in terms of future definitions of quality. So how do we build in continuous improvement to our efforts? So there's a lot involved in this side of the coin, and we are going to be very busy over the next couple of years. I'm going to run through these at a high level now, and then we will come back after we get through the objectives to talk about the timeline and how we're actually implementing. So the top 2 key things that I think many of you are already aware of is the updating of our methodologies. So we have already released VM0048, the tool for allocation and risk mapping will be also released very, very soon for those. We will be looking at a number of our other methodologies as well on both the REDD and IFM side. So on REDD, we'll be looking at avoided planned deforestation and the development of a module for that within VM0048, as well as doing some scoping work and potential module development for avoided unplanned degradation. On the IFM side, we've done an assessment of all of our IFM methodologies, and we'll soon be launching into consolidation and update to those as well. As a part of that process, we're also aware of the potential overlaps and gaps that come up between activities. So now, particularly that we are generally working in the context of national strategies that are covering all of these activities at that scale, we need to make sure that we're addressing any potential overlaps or gaps or even synergies that are possible to develop between activities like forestation, reforestation, improved forest management, and REDD. So we'll be looking at how those can be addressed both in the short term and the longer term. Within this as well, there's the link. This links a bit as well to the final goal around use, but companies are increasingly working on directly addressing their scope 3. So we are also looking at this sort of shift between credits that might today be a project basis and might in the future really be accounted for within scope 3. So how can we facilitate that or use some of the methodologies that we have today in a way that's adapted to scope 3 accounting? We're also looking at updates to the jurisdictional and nested REDD framework. So for those of you that aren't familiar, JNR is a framework for accounting at national or subnational scales that facilitates the nesting of project activities within it. We released JNR a number of years ago. There are several programs moving through that now, particularly within scenarios 1 and 2, if that means anything to you. In other words, as jurisdictional baselines or as full nested programs. But there are a number of innovations that have come up through the development of VM48, in particular the module VMD55 for avoided unplanned deforestation within that methodology that we want to incorporate back into JNR. So we will be working on that, as well as making sure that JNR is ICVCM aligned also in coming year. Within many of these methodologies, we're also looking more at some very specific issues in the space, particularly related to leakage and permanence. So we'll be revisiting the market leakage rules and looking at that, as well as implementing some new strategies within our permanence approach. So we have developed a long-term monitoring system that actually allows us to use remote sensing tools to detect potential reversals within project activities. So that will be rolling out in some piloting and then ultimately leveraged. And again, we'll get back into more detail in the timeline. We're also looking at the potential for a way of looking at our impact from a GHG and SD perspective in somewhat of a comparative way, making sure that our methods remain impactful and accurate as we move forward. So that may involve some kind of true-up mechanism at a portfolio level, and we'll be developing that concept over the next year. And then finally, related to many of our other efforts on the new era for Verra and process efficiency and whatnot, we are also working on our VVB oversight, so the auditing, and looking to ensure that throughout all of these updates, we're also ensuring that the audit system gets the sufficient training that they need on those, and that oversight of that process is also improved. Moving forward, the other half of goal 1 is really making sure that as we think about high integrity, we're also thinking about beyond carbon. So ensuring that these activities deliver multiple benefits, including for biodiversity and sustainable development outcomes, with respect for Indigenous peoples and local communities, and including within that improved free, prior, and informed consent guidance. So we'll be looking at strengthening safeguards, strengthening our criteria for projects and their grievance reporting and redress mechanisms, and developing a number of new tools for quantifying and identifying sustainable benefits. So that is usable by project activities across the board, but also potentially within the nature framework. So for those of you not familiar, there's another framework that we have under development. It'll be another program like the BCS focused on biodiversity and other nature benefits that help to really quantify and deliver on measurable outcomes that relate to the host of other benefits that can accrue from these activities, both to communities and to the environment. And that comes as well, similarly on the carbon side, with improvements in the auditing approach. So goal number 2 is really working with governmental programs and strategies. So we want to ensure at the end of the day that countries have clear strategies that maximize the potential of the voluntary carbon market to contribute to their NDCs and support national ambition. You know, we need to end this dichotomy between voluntary markets and governmental systems or compliance mechanisms, and really think of them as a whole and think together how we best support countries to be able to make use of those in the way that helps really maximize outcome in a strategic way for governments. So we're looking at really advancing and investing in our support and collaboration with governments. That's very much starting with a focus on VM48 and our rolling out of our avoided unplanned deforestation risk-based allocations. So we've begun this work already, but we'll be doing a lot more in the coming year, really building relationships, making sure that we're headed towards systems that are going to function well together. And in this this first round, we've talked a lot and in other webinars of around VM48 about that process, but just to say, we're working on activity data collection to ensure that we're able to move projects into, markets 2.0, if I can put it that way, as quickly as possible, while also looking for how we can better ensure that there is harmonization and the utilization of as closely aligned, if not the same, data and methods over time that countries are using in the context of their FRELs, in the context of other programs like FCPF. So we will be increasing our coordination with those other programs as well, and with that objective in mind. Moving forward, goal 3, we are again looking to make sure that we are maximizing and optimizing the latest science and technology in credible, consistent, and transparent ways. So we're doing that through 2 different external collaborations, which will then, of course, incorporate into our work the results of this. We are advancing a number of research collaborations, looking to really ensure that there is independent analysis and input from published research to inform some of our methodologies and key technical issues, so that we're improving that relationship with the academic community, as well as getting really useful analysis that is usable to inform our work as we are developing those new methodologies. And then, as was mentioned earlier, we're also establishing this Forest Carbon Technology Working Group, which is really going to help us put out clear guidance and sort of boundaries around how do we incorporate lots of new technologies in a way that doesn't require consistently updating or completely changing our methodological approaches. So how do we incorporate this sort of continuous improvement as we see technology continue to provide better and better data for this field? We'll be looking as well within that, both at sort of guidance around it, but also looking at very specific questions that come up in accounting as we develop specific methodologies, for example. And finally, goal 4, if we can move forward. Again, we want to ensure that these units are used with high integrity at the end of the day. So in general, this is supporting the work of other organizations like VCMI, who are looking to set out clarity on for companies on how to use units and what kinds of claims should be made. But it also involves some very specific things internally. We're working on updates to our methodologies to be able to make sure that it's possible to distinguish between emission reductions and removals, since those have different use cases in the market now. And also to develop some very specific products, for example, within the IFM sector, looking at things like long-lived harvested wood products, biochar and BECCS. And this is going to be something that's really useful to specific corporates, particularly as we think about this shift between projects and Scope 3 accounting in the long run. So there's a lot in there. I'll just want to go over a little bit more of what this means in practice in terms of our timeline. So we will come back to the first 2 in a moment. I have a much more detailed slide around the implementation of the methodologies. But in terms of looking at some of these gaps and overlaps between the different activities, that's something that we will be paying close attention to in our methodology development, and also maybe revisiting later as the sector continues to evolve, for example, around landscape accounting type approaches that make continue to emerge or evolve in the space. On Scope 3 accounting, we have a whole program on that's moving forward to provide additional guidance, and there may be, for example, updates to methodologies that provide a pathway for leveraging those methods within the context of Scope 3 accounting. So there may be some additional guidance and information this year, and then that program will be continuing throughout 2024 to provide additional resources. When it comes to updating JNR, as well as a number of other of our updates like market leakage rules and permanence, these are being synchronized largely with our VCS version 5 release. And so those are hopefully going to be out by the middle of 2025. The impact assessment mechanism that I mentioned, or possible true-up, is on a slightly lower, later timeline. Largely, we will be looking at it a lot in VCS version 5, but we're also looking for some of our research work to inform how we do that. So it's on a slightly lower timeline. We should be out around the middle of 2025 as well. On auditor training and oversight, we are releasing some of that information soon, particularly in terms of our auditor scorecards. And in the longer run, we'll have a new system for accreditation of our auditors that should be out early 2025. Updates to our FPIC and SD benefits are on a similar timeline. Our auditing work of safeguards, also there'll be a number of different components released throughout time as we are working on new programs like the Nature Framework, updating the rules, and then working on training and oversight of the auditors around that. If you go to the next slide, just to give a bit more detail on the methodology. So I know everyone is always asking us on activity data collection and allocation under the new RED methodology, VM48, in particular, the VMD55 module for avoided unplanned deforestation. So to walk you through a little bit briefly on this, we will be releasing a fee update schedule probably next month on cost for the activity data allocation to projects. We hope to complete the phase 1 jurisdictions, so you can look on our website for the different jurisdictions and the timing that they're on, but the first 13, we are hoping to have the allocations completed by around June, July of this year, with the phase 2 jurisdictions coming in towards the end of 2024. Some of them may extend early 2025. And then for some of those phase 1 jurisdictions, the original baseline validity periods go through 2025, so we'll be restarting that process for the next baseline validity period for some of those as well later this year. On our other methodologies, you can see the timelines here for avoided planned deforestation. We have just released an RFP, so it is open now if anyone is interested for a consultant to help us develop a module for avoided planned deforestation that will also sit in VM48. And hoping to complete that by early next year. We'll also be doing, as I mentioned, further work on avoiding unplanned degradation and looking at some of the issues of how that sits within VM48 and hopefully developing that on just a slightly slower timeline than APD. We have a number of other updates to methodologies that are also underway and have been for some time. So that includes VM33, which includes as a methodology for wetlands and a tropical peatlands methodology that's just getting started now. And then, as I mentioned, the updated and consolidated IFM methodology aiming for early to mid 2025. On government engagement, this is going to be a bit of an ongoing process. We are launching into a lot of outreach right now in Q1. We'll be doing a lot of outreach as the activity data and risk maps are allocated towards the end of the year for those phase 2 jurisdictions, and working over time, starting even now, but especially throughout 2025 and 2026 on how do we make sure that this process really is harmonized with other programs and with national strategies. And so aim that in our next baseline validity period that for these countries, particularly within VM48, that there is better and better alignment over time. And that'll obviously include a lot of engagement with other programs periodically and throughout this process to ensure that we're helping towards a more harmonized approach going forward. On goals 3 and 4, we mentioned so the research collaboration and the forest carbon technology working group. So we're establishing those now and early next quarter, and looking to put out outcomes from those by early next year. That research collaboration may continue on. We'll decide that afterwards, but I think there's a never-ending need for research in this field as things do evolve, to make sure that we are also continuously able to draw on that and improve our approaches. And finally, on the goal 4, we're looking at methodology updates for the distinction between reductions and removals. Those are underway now and have been. They should mostly be done by later this year. And then in terms of additional tools for IFM that may also inform some of the Scope 3 work, those are targeted for 2025. So there's a lot of information in there and a lot of activity that we are working on. I think that we'll be, as Julie mentioned, posting this webinar publicly. We're also looking at, as Julie mentioned, a quarterly stakeholder update webinar and process. So we will continue to put out updates as these different activities advance or change if they do. So look out for those for more updated and continuous information on where we stand. I think we have a lot of questions. So Julie, I don't know if you or others are looking through those, but we can perhaps take a few questions now. And for anyone that we don't get to or that are too specific for this call, we can write you afterwards, and you can also submit any questions to that email address, forestcarbon@verra.org.
Great. So thanks very much. As Naomi said, that was a ton of information that we downloaded in a very short amount of time, but feel free to go back, and we'll also post the slides so you can look at each slide in more detail if you want to, instead of having to scan through the recording. I'm gonna just shoot questions at people. They're gonna be not in any particular order, but Spencer, we got a question asking why we are not considering reducing emissions from wildfires, and we are doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. We are working on a methodology. It's under development, and we expect it to go out to public comment later this year. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to speak with you about that, but then also keep an eye on our updates, as that will be something we really want public input on.
Thank you. So we have a question for Tassila. Do we have any updates for countries that we've already been working with the government and Verra, together with the government and Verra? And what if the countries have their own national registry system? Will that be linked with the Verra registry?
Yes, thank you, Julie, and a very good question. Yes, we are working with several governments. We are working with governments like Brazil, Cambodia, Colombia, Kenya, Guatemala, DRC, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, especially on the activity data collection through our data service providers. And we are, like Naomi said, continuing to engage actively with governments. We have offered a webinar in January. We hope to offer another one. But more importantly, we are also welcoming these one-on-one interactions with several governments that are interested to work with us, so that we work on a one-on-one basis and contextualize the national circumstances for each location. Regarding the registry, of course, it is important that there are linkages in general, but we don't have yet a specific national registry that we can say it's happening on right now, but we would like to look into that and do that one-on-one, like I said, so that we see the linkages between the registries. So yeah, welcome to send us an email when you are a government representative or someone who works closely with governments and would like us to collaborate on this. We are really, really looking forward to working with you.
Okay. Naomi, I think we gave you enough of a break, but back to you to answer a question people want to know more about what our proposed true-up mechanism is.
Yeah, so we're looking across the program at how we do a better assessment of the impact of our activities. And within the RED sector, that may involve using other methods to look at impact, and then considering how we could potentially build a mechanism that ensures we're able to make adjustments going forward. If we do that, it would be at a portfolio level. So really looking across the whole portfolio, how activities are adding up and ensuring that they're delivering the impact that that are claimed. But it would not involve any sort of adjustment to project level crediting. So it's really about looking at the impact of the whole portfolio.
Great. Let's see. I think, so there's a lot of questions about ICVCM, the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Market. Like, what are approaches to submitting methodologies? What are approaches to incorporating the CCP into the core carbon principles into our methodology development process, or into the forest carbon strategy? And I would say we are still learning about the ICVCM and its approach. We support the idea of the ICVCM, and members of this group are participating in the multi-stakeholder working groups for different sectors. So we're learning a lot about what the ICVCM is doing currently. And so I think in general, we are aiming to make sure that the BCS program meets the ICVCM's criteria, and which we think it does already. And so we've submitted the program to ICVCM, and we have submitted certain methodologies to ICVCM. We will submit VM48, the new RED methodology, as soon as we have an opportunity to do so. And I don't know, Spencer or Naomi, I know you guys are on working groups. Do you have feedback related to ICVCM and how it fits into our forest carbon strategy?
I think the only note here is that, where we see opportunities to improve our methodologies, if they don't receive a CCP label, those will become, that'll bump them up the priority list so that we do have as much coverage with CCP labels as possible.
I see another one here on IFM that might also be good for you, Spencer. We talked about consolidating and updating IFM, but didn't give as much detail there. Can you talk about what that might look like in terms of consolidation, or what a new methodology might look like?
Sure. So I think what we want to make sure is that if we have a new methodology come out and it covers activities like log to protected, for example, we would need to look at our portfolio of existing log to protected IFM methodologies, and if there was overlapping coverage, we probably need to make a decision about if older methodologies need to be inactivated or ramped down in favor of new methodologies with new approaches. So that's, I think, going to be an ongoing conversation as we both expand the capabilities of IFM methodologies and look to add new geographies or tools that allow us to work across national across countries. And so I think there's a lot of work that we're going to need to do at a portfolio level to see where overlaps exist and try and minimize as much of that as possible, so we aren't allowing projects to select between methodologies. We think that it's better to have just a single methodology for activity types.
Thanks, Spencer. And sorry, while you're here, I see one more that would be good to lob your direction. Could you develop a little bit more on the market leakage piece and what we're doing with that?
Yeah, so currently the market leakage components for IFM are, they vary across different methodologies. So some of the leakage components are developed in the methodology themselves. Some of them reference the standard. Basically, what we're looking to do is come up with a standardized approach that probably lives outside of both the standard and the methodologies as its own tool that all methodologies reference. So we need to do some work on what best practices for market leakage are across different commodity types and different types of leakage to make sure we have all that covered. And then that can all point to one document that can be updated outside of a programmatic update. It gives us more flexibility and ability to kind of keep that current.
Thanks, Spencer.
I'm gonna put together a bunch of the questions around DMRV and ask them of Andrew to bring him into this conversation. So we have, how might a DMRV provider have their tech approved by Verra for use in forest programs? Is there a list of requirements? And then also, there are several platforms and companies that have gathered data and provide tools. Are we developing partnerships with those entities, or will we develop our own models? And then finally, that I could see right here in the group, it is time, I guess it's more of a statement than a question. It is time that DMRV provided error limits for estimates of carbon quantification as opposed to conservative quantification. So could you react to all those questions and statements?
Yeah, certainly. And apologies if these aren't necessarily super satisfactory answers, but Verra, we've done some pilots surrounding DMRV, and we are still doing a lot of the work around that. Hence our interest in setting up this forest carbon technology working group. This is to say we've worked with some organizations to set up some pilots that we are, through our technology solutions team, have been leading. And yes, I'm very aware that these sorts of uncertainties and errors and everything need to be shared, and that's something that we're considering. To my knowledge, I don't believe that we have anything in the way of approved requirements for an approved DMRV solution for any of our methodologies with Verra yet, at least within the context of forest carbon.
There is one tool, VT005, for how to use remote sensing, but that we're updating that because it's out of date and doesn't take into account a lot of the newer approaches. So that is a good reference tool, but we will be updating it soon.
Yes.
Folks are looking for updates on the new ARR methodology, whether it's being approved under CORSIA or when we're going to submit it to CORSIA, I think is a better question for Spencer. And then also when it will be updated, because people know that it's already in, even though it only came out in September of last year, it's already undergoing an update. So Spencer, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so we are working on a minor revision to the ARR methodology to help correct or clarify some areas where we saw folks having issues and where we recognize there's always room for improvement. And we also expect to initiate a major revision to the methodology based on bigger items that have been proposed to us since releasing the methodology. So that'll, the minor revision is expected to have a public comment period that starts in the coming weeks. And then we would move through that in about a month. So I think in early Q2, we would expect to have a revised ARR methodology out and then be working on the major revision to the methodology. As for the CORSIA label, yes, we do expect to put that forward. We just need to have some internal coordination on getting that into the CORSIA labeling for the next round.
Salvador, I see you've been responding to a lot of questions in writing about training. I know you recently led a VVB training course for JNR. Are there other things we can say about how Verra is educating stakeholders about our forest carbon work?
Yes, we are still in the planning stage of these several activities, but as Naomi described in the strategy, we intend to strengthen our engagement with the stakeholders, governments, with the BBBs, and also project developers and so on. We are putting together how to deploy these, including, of course, capacity building and trainings and dissemination of the new methodology and how to implement the new methodology. And we are envisioning, for now, we conducted a training on the JNR framework for BBBs. We are also planning a training, a remote training, based training on the new methodology. Perhaps for BBBs in principle, but perhaps for some other stakeholders. But we are still in the process of putting together how to implement this idea. This goal, actually, not idea. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question about updating the CCB, the Climate Community and Biodiversity Standards, and updating and what the nature framework is going to be like. So I can share links to those in response to those separate questions, but just to say, there will be an update to the Climate Community and Biodiversity program this year, as well as our SD Vista program. And the nature framework is meant to be launched in later this year. So I think we can all look forward to those things, and as Naomi mentioned, safeguards updates and stakeholder engagement updates in the VCS program in our version 5, which is under development currently and meant to be launched in the first quarter of next year. Anybody see any other questions? I know we're running short on time. Maybe this is a good challenging one to kind of end up with. How is Verra coping with the slow pace of standard development in emerging markets, especially those with large forest extents? Are you interested in working with private partners to speed it up? I'm not really certain what this is getting at, but I think we see great need for funding from carbon markets everywhere in the world, not just in emerging markets. And I really think that with the new RED methodology and our new IFM and ARR methodologies, we'll be able to, with the standardized approach they take, they will make it a lot easier for project proponents to engage in forest carbon activities. And we do work with a lot of private project developers, for example, and investors in forest carbon programs are often private investors, so investors in the projects themselves, and that is important key for getting startup funding. So anybody else have thoughts on that question? Okay.
I see one other last question, maybe just about VM48 and the connection to JNR and its similarity with scenario 1 and how that might impact CORSIA. So, as mentioned, we will be submitting VM48 and our AR methodology for VM47 to CORSIA in the next program update round. But the way that CORSIA took their initial decisions was really to say that where activities were related to RED, that they should be nested in jurisdictional programs. And they did that primarily because they wanted to see that activities within that sector were within jurisdictional programs that had national scale monitoring, safeguards, and national RED strategies in place, which is why they approved JNR, projects nested in JNR, and they've subsequently approved, I think, FCPF and ART. So Our argument, I think, will largely be that that VM48 is a way of nesting those activities, but it's a bit unclear at the moment how CORSIA will receive that methodology, either as an independent as standalone projects or requiring that to be nested in one of those approved programs. So we don't have clarity on that yet, but are working with CORSIA to make that submission and hopefully get to a resolution on how it will or won't be approved. I don't well, I think it depends on how they accept VM48, what that may or may not mean for JNR scenario 1, which is a similar jurisdiction-wide reference or baseline that can be used by nested activities. So watch this space on that front.
Thanks. So I think we are going to end it here, but thank you all for your questions. I know there's lots that we didn't get to, and folks who had their hands raised, we're only going to take questions via the chat, but you can follow up with forestcarbon@verra.org with additional questions. And if we didn't get to your questions, please send them to that address, and Leela will respond or send it to the right person on the team to respond. So thanks very much for hearing us out, and I hope that you learned a lot and that we continue to engage with us on this forest carbon strategy over the next 3 years. So thanks very much.
So, bye-bye.